So today we're pleased to have Mike Stevens, who's an alum of Penn State and held a variety of different roles in the executive of the PGA, and is going to talk to us about a lot of interesting things about professional golf and maybe some stuff if Dr. Ross from the law school, Professor Ross from the law school, probes him enough on the recent proposed merger between the Saudi Arabia funded LIV Tour and the PGA. Just a pitch for coming attraction. So on October 13th, we've got Shar Murray Curtis, who is going to talk to us about the new women's sports initiative at Penn State. That should be a great talk. On October 27th, we're going to have Dr. Kurt French and the Tailgate Archaeology Project, Booze and Culture at Penn State. That'll be a lot of fun. November 10th, Michelle Sykes, who has a new book out on Kenyan running. And on November 17th, the staff of the Collegians to talk about what it's like as a student to cover the front porch of the university, the athletic program. But I will sit down and pass it to Professor Ross and Mike Stevens.
So thank you all for coming out on a Friday, and I see a number of students here, and I know that Professor Dyerson is offering extra credit, so I hope you appreciate the experience that you have with the preeminent Olympic historian and one of the top sports historians in the country, globally recognized. You can go almost anywhere in the world if you end up in a nerdy conversation about sports history, you mention Penn State, and then they can go, oh, you know Mark Dyerson, and then you can sort of say, yeah, I know Mark Dyerson. So that's really nice. We have a diverse audience here, and a fantastic guest in Mike Stevens. He has extensive experience with event management, primarily in the golf area, and most directly relevant to what we're going to be talking about today, a former executive of the PGA Tour. So the point of the conversation is both to talk to people who are here because they're interested in golf, to see what's going on in golf, but also because what's been going on in golf has very significant implications about the role of sports and the sports business, and the whole role of the Saudi influence and so-called sport washing has a lot of influence about sports society and ethics. So hopefully that covers the interests of, if you're not interested in golf or how the sports business runs or how sports fits in with society, then I feel sorry for you because we might not interest you, but otherwise I think we're going to have a pretty good conversation. So if you could start off the uninitiated here, what is the PGA Tour and who runs the PGA Tour? Why don't you start off helping us out with that so we can understand sort of what the context of what this, how this happened.
All right, I'll start out by just showing how true blue of Penn Stater I am. Get these handmade boots. You can get those at Alberta Boot in Calgary, handmade. I'll introduce you to the guy that makes them. So you want to know about the PGA Tour? Well, it's a great organization. It's the organization that basically runs the top professional golf tournaments in the world. It actually started in 1916, PGA of America. Basically, it was a lot of professionals who drove around the country playing at events for money, and just evolved from that point. In the 1960s, it became a little bit more formalized, basically because the players were unhappy with how much money they were being paid. And they wanted to make more money, and the PGA of America at the time had just done a major television deal, and they wanted a larger piece of that for purses. And I could say that for 1960, and I could say that right now for 2023. It's the same issue, never enough money. But anyway, this group of players organized and formed their own association, and at the time it was called the PGA Tournament Players Division. And it wasn't until 1975 that the PGA Tour actually became into existence as a name. And then it just continued, and it's governed. You asked me about governance. The PGA Tour is a players' association, which means I, as a senior executive at the tour, and even the commissioner for that matter, I worked for all the players. The players were my boss, and they control everything. It's their say how the tours run, the regulations, etc. But it's governed by a policy board, and the policy board was previously, before LIV, made up of 4 independent directors and 4 player directors. And the 4 independent directors were literally the captains of industry in the United States. Initially, when I first got involved, Del DeWint was the chairman of the board. He was the head of Westinghouse. When I became a senior executive, Vic Gansey, the head of Condé Nast, was the chairman of the policy board. John McCoy, the head of Bank One, was a member. Ken Thompson, the head of Wachovia Bank, was a member. Randall Stevenson, the head of AT&T, policy board member. Ed Whitaker, who was the head of AT&T, but also was the gentleman who President Bush called upon to save General Motors when the housing crisis hit in 2008. So these are very well established, distinguished, very well respected individuals who are the independent directors. And then the 4 player directors are elected by the players themselves. But also underneath that, the manner with which communication runs is that each tour has what's called a player advisory council. Champions Tour has one, PGA Tour has one.
Champions Tour being the
Senior Tour, yeah. And PGA Tour has a pack, and so does the Korn Ferry Tour, the developmental tour. Made up of 12 players, and all the players who have grievances or ideas or whatever feed their information through the Player Advisory Council. It's morphed, worked over, every angle is looked at, and if it's something that's viable, it ultimately is ratified by the Player Advisory Council, then taken to the PGA Tour Policy Board for presentation and consideration, and then a vote. And this is important when we start talking about LIV Golf and how things got really screwed up versus how the PGA Tour is supposed to work. Since LIV Golf, with the dissatisfaction of the players with that.
Before you jump into LIV Golf, let me take you, I feel like the teacher would be really bright, a math student who just wants to jump ahead to algebra, and you just want to have them show their work for the rest of the students. So, so before you get to LIV Golf saw this as an opportunity because a number of players were unhappy with the way the PGA Golf Tour was going on. Could you talk a little bit about, let's move back in time a year or 2 years before LIV Golf, and why were the players unhappy? And if the players were unhappy, why wasn't this player association responsive to their unhappiness?
Well, I started in professional golf in 1980, right out of here, did an internship, PGA Tour event on Hilton Head, became a tournament director after a couple of years and had a great career. From the day I started, the players have basically had 5 grievances. And these are the same 5 grievances that existed back in 1916 when professional golf started. First, it was players always wanted to play a fewer number of events in order to be a member. On the PGA Tour, you have to play 15 events in order to maintain your membership status. They always wanted larger purses. They're never playing for enough money. They wanted to be paid for missing the cut. PGA Tour event starts with 156 players. After Friday or Thursday and Friday's rounds, the field's cut, usually the top 60 or the top 70 in ties. Those players that didn't make the cut go home without getting a penny. And they've always wanted to be paid for missing the cut. And an important element is the players have always wanted their marketing rights back. When you become a PGA Tour member, you give up your individual marketing rights, which means I, as the president of the Champions Tour, control what a player has on his shirt, his sleeve, his hat, where he plays.
This is what we know in the college scene as the NIL.
NIL, yeah, exactly. A little bit more organized than the PGA Tour than NIL currently is, but it's the same dynamic. But then from a tournament perspective, I was a tournament director for a long time. We always wanted designated events. And what a designated event is, it's where eligibility is based on a certain number of players appearing. So top players, in this case, perhaps the top 20 on the money list, would have to play a certain number of tournaments. In the case of the PGA Tour, when they developed designated events just last year, they had 8 events that they called designated events that the top 20 money winners had to play. And the player was exempt from one of those 8 if he couldn't make it. If he tried to get out of more than 2, he was fined significantly. And some of you who are close to golf may remember that Rory McIlroy incurred a fine of $3 million for skipping 2 designated events without approval from the commissioner. So those grievances have been in existence since day one.
And why didn't the advisory, this 8-person board, respond to those grievances?
They did to a certain degree, but players never have enough. They always want to make more. And if you've been close to it, you'll understand that. They always want larger purses. They always want better services. No matter what you provide them, they want more. And they've also never been told no in their lives. And we as executives of the PGA Tour are the ones that have to tell them no. And that's not always a great position to be in when you're actually working for the player that you're telling no to. It doesn't go over very well sometimes. But you have to be open and honest and communicate. But when you're running an organization of this type with so many individuals, with so many ideas and so many unique wants and needs, it's just a quagmire to administer. And so you have to try to stay as consistent as you can with your communications and also explain everything as best you can so that the players understand what direction you can go down. Also, the players don't recognize ever the need for reserve funds or rainy day funds. They want all the money that flows through the PGA Tour to be put towards purses. And they all thought that all of us executives made way too much money. And they wanted our salaries reduced, and none of us to a T felt like we were making enough money. We wanted to make more. So it's just this real interesting dynamic and a balance that you have to maintain. Now, the interesting thing about who the policy board members were, these are incredibly well-respected corporate leaders. And oftentimes in the policy board meetings, when they would get a little heated, it took one of the independents to actually help to set the players straight. Because there's an old saying, you're only an expert if you're from out of town. So being an executive that works at the PGA Tour, a player is going to think I'm full of crap. But if Randall Stevenson is saying the exact same thing to the player, they start shaking their heads and they start to understand.
I have to just disagree with you on one issue. Tomorrow night at Beaver Stadium, we're going to see 110,000 expert offensive coordinators who will be gathered there all.
And they're all from out of town.
So now that you've identified, that was really helpful, Mike. So how does Live Golf come in to take advantage of this discontent?
Well, here's one thing a lot of people don't understand or have ever thought about or recognized. There have been a total of 4 rebellions on the PGA Tour in its history. The first, with Live being the 4th. The first happened in the 1960s when those players playing for the PGA of America decided, hey, wait a minute, we don't like the way it's being run, we don't like the way where the money's going, we're going to form our own player association. So that was the first defection. The second some may remember, younger people won't. But in 1983, Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus formed an alliance to oust the commissioner of the PGA Tour because of marketing rights and the fact that the PGA Tour was getting in the golf course and real estate business. And Jack and Arnie felt like the tour should stay out of that business and stay out of the marketing business because they felt like the tour was taking away their ability to make money through endorsements, through golf course architecture, whatever. And they lobbied the players. Actually, it was quite impressive as to how much support they had. But in a meeting, or right prior to a meeting where this was all going to come to a head, Jack and Arnie failed to remember that they signed a document when Commissioner Beeman was hired as commissioner, because Dean had a very grand vision of where he wanted to take the PGA Tour. He didn't just want to do tournaments. He wanted to be broader. He wanted to be more like the NFL with marketing exposure and more opportunities for his players. And in this document that all the players had to sign when Commissioner Beeman was hired, it mentioned just that. The tour would get into the marketing business, and the tour also get into the golf course and real estate business, and all the players supported that because it was a new, unique vision for the PGA Tour. Once Arnie and Jack realized that they signed that document, they had no leg to stand on, and their support waned, and Dean maintained his job. In the 1990s, Greg Norman, who's obviously involved with golf, tried to start a world tour. And I was intimately involved in that because I was the president running a tournament in Hilton Head, but I was also the president of the PGA Tour Tournaments Association, so I represented all the tournament directors in the country. And Greg came up with the idea, didn't have the money that he had now with Live Golf, but again, came up with this new concept: fewer events, larger purses, limited fields, and the ability to answer all the grievances that the players have had over all the years. But unfortunately, in the player meeting that Greg held to try to garner support, which he thought going into the meeting he had massive support, Arnold Palmer stood up in the meeting and said, "Jack and I tried to do this 20 some odd years ago, and it didn't work. And we feel like the PGA Tour is being run fine, and we don't need another tour." Silence. Arnold spoke, the world listened. Greg Norman's world tour went by the wayside. He continued to try to lobby to get it done, but ultimately it couldn't happen. However, a few months later, the PGA Tour, and I'm now at the PGA Tour as the head of marketing. The PGA Tour decides to develop its own world tour, called them the World Golf Championships. Created 4 special events, large purses, no cut, fewer fields, the whole bit. Norman was livid, absolutely livid, and basically hated the PGA Tour from that day forward. And so now Live Golf is around. It's the 4th rebellion, if you will. And it just gives you a little bit of a blueprint of things that could possibly happen as they kind of have.
So let me, I'm going to leave room for Q&A. Let me touch on a couple of other key points. One is, as a businessman, the strategic response of the PGA to Live Golf. Blocking Live Golf members from participating in PGA tours they would like to participate in, and presumably fans would like to see them participate in, and staking out this moral view that to participate in Live Golf is to disrespect 9/11 families. And then, when that didn't work, having to completely flip with the deal with Live Golf. So you've been gone from the PGA Tour now for how long?
6 years.
6 years, plenty of time to have an outside expert opinion. So if you could offer your outsider's view of what were they thinking when they developed this strategy? And from a business point of view, was it just a good gamble that went wrong, like Drew Aller tries to go long for a pass and it just doesn't work? Or was it misguided for some reason that you might speculate on?
Yeah, well, I was a heartbeat away from being Jay Monahan. So I was asked if I wanted to be the next commissioner, and I said, and so that I could have been the guy sitting in that seat. And I would have handled it a little bit differently. But first thing you have to understand inside baseball, Jay Monahan and Greg Norman never met personally as far as live golf goes. Greg tried to reach out to Jay, phone call, not returned.
He didn't return.
No.
Greg Norman.
Well, Greg's a member, so we have policy at the PGA Tour.
Tip for students here: if Greg Norman ever wants to call you, please take the call.
Take the call. Yeah, your life might be a little bit better, huh? But we had a policy at the PGA Tour that player called, if you weren't too busy, you had to take the call immediately. If you didn't take the call, you had to attempt to call him back by the end of the day, and if you couldn't call back by the end of the day, someone on your staff had to call the player back, and you had to call them within 24 hours. That's the policy. Greg's a member. Jay never returned the call. Greg wrote him letters, emails, never got returned, went through intermediaries. No, nothing. So now the tone is set. For a guy that already is upset with the PGA Tour, the commissioner is not even responding to him. So that set the initial tone. So the strategy was just odd. And first of all, Greg was calling because he was going to tell Jay, I have somewhere between 680 million and $1 billion in my back pocket that I would like to invest in the PGA Tour. And Jay basically said, not interested. Thank you very much. And because of the tension between Greg and the PGA Tour, and part of this is between Greg and Tim Fincham. Tim is the former commissioner of the PGA Tour. Tim is the one who put Jay forth to be the commissioner. And I'm sure Jay called Tim and said, hey, Norman's calling me. What do you think's going on? And I know exactly what Tim said that I won't say in this room for mixed company. My mom would wash my mouth. I was so. But I think that set the tone. Now, on the PGA Tour, we have what's called an executive committee. It's all the senior executives, and we're the guys, girls that run the PGA Tour and offer the commissioner advice and counsel. And so you sit around a table, you talk about initiatives, you talk about issues, and personality comes into play to a certain degree. And sometimes when you're sitting in the hot seat, you think you might know more than you do know. And sometimes you tend to think that you're right and others are wrong. And I know the individuals, the executives that were sitting around that table, and I know the advice and counsel that they would have given Jay as to how to handle this. The first thing would have been sit down with Greg, hear what he has to say. But he chose not to do that, so now it became confrontational. And it's like, how can I defeat my enemy? And either Jay didn't know how much money Greg had behind him, or he didn't care. Money is the root to this whole evil, if you want to call it an evil. And money is how it's going to get resolved. But the tour doesn't have that much money. When I left, we had about 450 million in reserves, which is basically a rainy day fund. And when the economy failed in 08 and 09, we dipped into those reserves to save the PGA Tour because we were losing sponsors every day. I mean, General Motors, who sponsored 5 of our events, called up and said, we're done. And we're like, which are you going to drop the Buick open? They said, no, we're done. We're out. We're out of all 5 events. Sue us if you want, but line up because everybody's going to sue us. So you use that to save the day. Well, Jay used that money to battle live. Number one, through litigation, about 50 million was spent on litigation. And then to prop
lawyers out there keep that in mind.
Yeah, and to prop up tournaments by offering higher purses because Live came out, 14 event schedule, a minimum $25 million purse, which was basically double of any PGA Tour purse. And so Jay had to act fast, and he thought that by propping up the events financially with larger purses, that would thwart the exit of the top players. But it wasn't working. So then he made the biggest mistake he could ever make as the head of a players association. He went political. And you always try to not put your players in an awkward position. And Jay went down the 9/11 path with the 9/11 Victims Foundation and marrying that up to the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund and this evil, dirty money. And how in the world could any player, with any morals or values, go to participate in an event with this type of backing? So it's supposedly good against evil. And the PGA Tour's image is pristine. It's honesty, it's integrity, it's everything it's ethics, it's everything positive in life. And we call rules on ourselves. We don't need an official to throw a red flag because my ball moved, nobody saw it, but I did, so I have to call this rule on myself. And so the minute he put the players in that scenario, it became incredibly awkward for any player, because the media in here, if there are, you're going to say, well, what do you mean you're going to live? You're going against all the people that died on 9/11. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm going to go play golf, and I'm going to make a living for my family. But that ultimately, that was one of the things that caused the downfall of the PGA Tour. But it was just, honestly, I hate to say it, but it was terrible management on Jay's part. He didn't take the advice and counsel of his peers, but also he had a policy board that were new. And the way the independent directors have been moved through the ranks, you always had several independents that had been there for years, and they understood how the PGA Tour works. They understood how the communication with the players works, and how the governance and how the decisions are made. But there are now 4 new independent directors. They increased the independence from 4 directors to 5. Randall Stevenson was the only one that stayed. But you had 4 new independent directors that came in. Ed Hurley, big-time Wall Street attorney. Jimmy Dunn, big-time Wall Street mover and shaker, as well as 2 other individuals. But Ed and Jimmy were the 2 that were kind of taking the lead. And what I found out from Inside Baseball, Jimmy Dunn, prior to LIV even happening, had only attended 2 policy board meetings prior to this. So he really didn't have an understanding of the culture. And basically made decisions based on how a corporation would make a decision, and a publicly traded corporation.
So,
or privately owned.
between these individuals, et cetera, and you may have already given me the answer. So some of you may know, I'm the only person I'm convinced knows the answer in the audience is the historian Mark Dyerson and me, because I studied this. But if you look at the history of sport in the United States, commercial sport, there's a dominant monopoly league in each sport. And they always face challenges. And we know that. And a number of the challenges fail. The Branch Rickey's Continental League, the All-American Football Conference, the Donald Trump-backed USFL, the Federal League. These all fail. But then there's the American League in baseball, the American Football League in pro football, the American Basketball Association, the World Hockey Association. There's all these examples of leagues that have been successful. And what happens? They start, the dominant league tries to put them out of business with all sorts of dirty tricks. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't work, they merge. Did Jay Monahan not know this?
I think he felt like he could win because he had the players on his side, the remaining players. And he demonized the ones who left. And some of them actually did his work for them. I mean, Phil Mickelson did actually nothing good for Live Golf, and could have been their golden boy. But Phil's unique, and he has opinions, and he made them public, and it just, I mean, I think Greg, just knocked his head against the wall, like, oh my God, here I got the greatest player, most loved player in the world coming to Live Golf, and he opened his mouth, and what he should have said didn't come out. and so, but I think Jay thought he could win the side of the players. He had Rory and Tiger on his side, but that's a whole nother story. There's an understory to that as to why Rory and Tiger stayed supportive of the PGA Tour. And it's primarily because they were in the process of forming a business that is a team golf video scenario. I think it's called, I have it written down, it's called TGRW, I think was the name of the tour. But TMRW Sports was their company, and TGL is the tour that's about to kick off next year. I think it's 15 events with 3-man teams played literally on video simulators. So they're going to play tournaments hitting balls in the screen. But Rory and Tiger, in order for this to come off, and it's a huge opportunity for them financially, more than it could have made it live. They needed the PGA Tour license backing in order to do this, to give them credibility. And also, come to find inside baseball, Jay Monahan and Tim Fincham were both investors in that company. So the agents who control players basically said, look, we need you to help us through this, and here's the position you take. Now, I'm speculating on this, but it's pretty much common sense if you understand sports and sports business. So, don't say anything negative about the PGA Tour, say positive, and everything will be great. And down the road, when we sell TMRW, you're going to make zillions, and life will be great. So no worries.
So I have one more question before I want to open it up. Mike, what is your crystal ball, which is better than a crystal ball person's, of your educated guess of what do you see happening, assuming the Justice Department doesn't completely throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing, what do you see professional golf looking like in 5 years?
Well, the first thing is the executives of the PGA Tour have to get through the Justice Department investigation and how it relates to collusion, because there's a lot of examples out there where collusion was involved, and by the PGA Tour manipulating clubs, operators, players. Basically, if you go with Live, you're never going to work in golf again. So that's going to be interesting how that comes out. The litigation itself is over. All the various antitrust suits are over. That's what this sort of a merger, when they signed the merger. But this isn't a merger. And this was going to happen anyway. It's all about money. And this infighting couldn't continue because neither side, Liv was incurring a lot of expenses just like the PGA Tour was. Liv's ball was just bigger. But the litigation side goes away. And now you've got a situation where it's going to be more of a partnership versus a merger. And they're going to take, and I've got this inside baseball, what they're working on is they're trying to take the best of all worlds. Because Liv came out of the box with top players, okay? But they didn't have great golf courses to play on. They were playing on kind of secondary level golf courses. And they had a zero television contract. And there's no way Liv could have survived by just tapping into the public investment fund continually, but sports live and die by television rights. It's all about television rights. It's Penn State, it's PGA Tour, it's Live Golf, it's women's tennis, it doesn't matter. You live and die by the television rights you garner. And your business basically is run daily by how you can impact those television rights. And so Liv had a horrible television deal, so it was going to be very difficult for them to survive without tapping into their funds continually. PGA Tour, on the other hand, had an excellent TV deal. It paid a lot of money, but they just lost 48 of their stars. And the feeder system was the Korn Ferry Tour. So one week you're watching a PGA Tour event with all the top players in the world. You know, Brooks Koepka, Phil Mickelson, you know, Randall Chambly, you name everybody, all the top players. The next week you're watching the PGA Tour event with Jack Smith. Who's Jack Smith? Well, he's a kid that was on the Korn Ferry Tour that became eligible because there's a category that says you're eligible to turn under not otherwise exempt. And so they had to fill a void of 48 players out of 156 from the Korn Ferry Tour that nobody ever heard of. So guess what happens? You get a knock on your door. It's the television networks and the title sponsors going, hey, wait a minute. Nobody's watching our tournaments anymore because they don't know anybody that's playing in them, you know? So consequently, your ratings are going down. Our exposure is going down. And guess what? We have a television negotiation coming up in a couple of years. If you don't fix this, you're not going to get as high television rights next time around as you got this time around, which is, I mean, dreadfully scary. So I see the future like this. Live Golf was good for the PGA Tour because I think the tour was becoming a little bit complacent. It was obvious the communication with the players was horrible. You never make decisions like they made at the tour without confiding in the players and getting player feedback. So that's all changed. They've changed the governance now. It's now 4 independent directors and 6 player directors. So now the players have the final say by 2 votes, which is massive. They're going to form this partnership, and I think what's going to happen is you're going to see 14 top tier events that are going to be played on all the great golf courses. They're going to have really large purses, probably 25 to 30 million, with the winner getting 18% of that. So just do the math, it's a lot of money. They're going to play on the greatest golf courses. They're going to be limited fields, probably 60 to 80 players, no cut. And those will be the pinnacles. And that'll include the 4 major championships, which will continue. The second tier is going to be what is now the PGA Tour. It's probably going to be a makeup of 30 to 32 events. It will have the balance of the rest of the players, journeymen. Some of the top tier guys could play in PGA Tour events if they wanted to. But it'll be the journeyman, and I think that tour is going to be the feeder system for the top tier tour. And now, the DP World Tour, which has just been forgotten in this whole scenario, which was formerly called was the European Tour. The DP World Tour, Korn Ferry Tour, PGA Tour Latino America, PGA Tour Canada, I think are now all going to become feeder systems to the PGA Tour. And that's going to be the new world.
So this will sort of regularize this process. I have to interject one thing about the European Tour, because I just love this, which is the European Tour and the PGA Tour were taking the position that if you organize a tournament, you're either in the tournament or you're not in the tournament. But of course, the European Tour always took the position that if somebody wanted to leave the Munich Open to go participate at Pebble Beach, they could do it. And then when they asked the European Tour guys, well, how come you let your people go to Pebble Beach for the PGA Tour? They said, well, that's because we're strategic allies. And you know, my answer was when Johnny Rockefeller was trying to put everybody else out of the oil business, and JP Morgan would not give the railroads to his rivals, they were just doing that because they were strategic allies. Right. So you could sort of...
Well, I can tell you that it wasn't the reverse, because one of the issues is, as a PGA Tour member, you have to get a conflicting event release in order to play a non-PGA Tour event the same week that the PGA Tour event's played. Well, PGA Tour events are played 48 weeks out of the year, so you have 4 open weeks. So you have to get conflicting event releases all the time, and you can only get a few a year. And so for a top player who wanted to go play on the European tour, let's say the Scottish Open, the probability of him getting a conflicting event release would be minimal, unless he agreed to do a quid pro quo. Okay, I'll let you go play the Scottish Open, but you have to agree to play, 2 other events that you haven't played in the last 5 years. But conversely, on the European Tour side, no. Keith Pelly is letting him come over here because he wants to get the exposure. But what people don't realize is when Liv started, when Greg couldn't get in to meet with Jay, Greg Norman called Keith Pelly, the head of the European Tour, and offered him the opportunity to be the lead tour. Keith called up Jay Monahan, and for some reason, nobody knows why, but Keith Pelly decided to take $90 million from the PGA Tour as opposed to $680 to $1 billion from Liv Golf. And nobody's really sure why. And Keith Pelly found out about the partnership merger off of Twitter. He wasn't called before the merger was announced. So that kind of gives you a little idea of where the DP World Tour is going to be standing in this world order of golf.
So interesting. Thank you. I could go on for about 2 hours, but questions from the audience.
So my question stems from multiple cues that you said, that money is the root cause of all evil and everything. So as a director of PGA, how does it impact you when a big player gets involved in a controversy? So does his negative image affect you in talking to the sponsors or the advertisers or how?
Yeah.
The different stakeholders?
Oh, absolutely.
So you were at the PGA Tour, if my math is right, when Tiger Woods had some of his difficulties.
Exactly.
Maybe you could talk about that as a case study.
Well, when you become a PGA Tour member, I brought this. This is the player handbook. Okay, this is everything you need to know as to what it takes to be a member of the PGA Tour and how to maintain your membership, as well as the disciplinary action elements of this. There's this all-encompassing regulation called Conduct on Becoming a Professional. And that basically means if you're a jerk in public and it gets a lot of exposure, you're going to be lighter in the wallet and you may not be able to play for a while. and so it is kind of all-encompassing, and there are minor, intermediate, and major penalties, and they're all based on financial penalties versus competition. You can be suspended, or for a couple of events, you can be suspended for years or whatever. But yeah, I mean, the image of the players they're independent contractors with the PGA Tour. They're not employees. I worked for them. Okay, so they are their own brand, and they're being coached by their agents and their team as to how they need to conduct themselves and what they need to do. Because if they do everything right, they're successful and winning a lot of tournaments or whatever, their value is going to go through the roof. They're going to get a ton of endorsements. Doesn't matter how much they make in prize money. It's all about endorsements. That's where you make all your money. And there are a lot of incentives based on that. The more airtime you get, whatever you make. But and then we as the PGA Tour, we benefit from that because they're great people that everybody loves. But when they stub their toe and it becomes, a lot of times it happens and nobody's aware of it. We don't publicize the disciplinary actions of the PGA Tour. It's always kept private and secret. But when somebody like Tiger Woods does what he does, you have to take action, but you never heard what we did. But you saw some of the elements of what he did. And some of the things that he did to redeem himself were because of things we advised that he do, or otherwise he would experience more disciplinary action. But the other side of the coin is when you're sitting in a meeting and somebody walks in, they go, "Did you hear just what happened last night with Tiger Woods?" Now, I benefited from Tiger Woods. I was at the PGA Tour in 1998 when Tiger was at his peak, you know, and oh my God, phone was ringing off the hook of companies. I was the head of marketing or wanted to sponsor the PGA Tour. I mean, it was the best. Well, when the guy walks into the office and goes, "You hear about Tiger Woods?" I go, "Oh, what happened?" And you go, "Oh my God!" And it's just, you just envision your world coming to an end because he was the top player. Everybody loved him. Our demographic of golf spectators went through the roof. I mean, we've tried for years to get the 18 to 35 demographic in golf and have failed miserably and spent millions of dollars trying to get that demographic to be involved in golf. It happened overnight with this guy named Tiger Woods. Man, we had kids everywhere. You know, it was fantastic. But yeah, a player's actions impact the brand of the PGA Tour. And then we have to do everything we possibly can to protect that image. And it comes through advising the player what he needs to do. And if he doesn't do it, you have to bite the bullet and you go, "You're done. See you later." But most of the time they realize that it's the only skill they have. They're the best in the world at it. And if they want to continue to make money, they're usually going to listen. And they have this gene in them that's pretty unique. They love to compete. They've been competing their entire lives. And they've been competing against the same people their entire lives. Tiger Woods, whoever he's competing with today, are the same people he'd been competing with since he was 10 years old. Through junior golf, through high school, through college, through early years on the PGA Tour. And people are going to say, "Well, Tiger Woods will never play the PGA Tour champions." I'm like, "Yeah, he will. He's going to play." And the reason he's going to play is because he has to compete. It's just in their nature, it's in their blood. So we tend to have a little leverage with the players in that regard. But there are other stories too where some guys you don't see anymore. Now, you may not know their names, but they've done such egregious things that they're not around anymore. I had to suspend a player once for because he got convicted of a felony in income tax evasion. And he was shocked that I suspended him for a year. He couldn't believe it. He tried to argue. And I'm like, "Dude, you're going to prison, the federal prison for a year. You know, what? You're not going to be able to play anyway, so you're suspended." "But I'm not leaving for 3 weeks." I'm like, "Dude, you're suspended, man. You're gone. Have fun. See you later."
With COVID happening over the from 2020 to 2021, in terms of the TV watchship or the viewership, do you think that COVID benefited? I know it could hurt your marketing deals and sponsorships, but do you think that you saw more of a younger demographic join in and watching the sport as a whole, or do you think it hurt more?
Yeah, I don't. Since I wasn't at the tour, I wouldn't have had access to those numbers, those research numbers that I would have gotten every day. But is there somebody here that's golf research numbers that might know? But yeah, did they go up?
I'd have to look at it.
Yeah, but it probably went up because everybody was watching everything anyway. But golf's problem through the years have been just our tradition, our history, you know, and the fact that, you know, number one, it's expensive to play. But number two, it's very forbidding because you're told no everywhere. You know, you have to keep quiet and, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's not like, "Yeah, come on, let's have a good time." But guess what? That's what Live Golf is. And that's why Live Golf has made such an impact. Live Golf is a party. I mean, it's crazy. And I know this because I just got done trying to negotiate on behalf of a client of mine to host a Live Golf event. And it just ended just a couple of weeks ago. We didn't get it, unfortunately, but we came pretty close, but it's awfully expensive to do. But it is a party. They have a DJ playing music the whole time. It's all about hospitality and just, I mean, it's crazy. Players are really laid back. They're allowed to wear shorts while they're playing, and they're very engaging. It's almost like the Champions Tour is the players, the way we grew our tour and grew our numbers is we made the players be more engaging, and Live Golf picked up on that with the younger players. And so it's going to have an impact on the demographic for sure.
Can you share, as somebody from the golf world, why it is that a 18-year-old kid can stand in Beaver Stadium with 110,000 people screaming so loud that the metal in their helmet is rattling, while 300-pound guys are trying to tackle you while you have to look downfield to throw a ball. But a 45-year-old expert guy sitting on a big green area needs complete quiet in order to hit a golf ball.
I'm that guy. I don't know. That's because I can tell you when I hear a weird sound in my backswing, for whatever reason I flinch, and that causes me to, and I'm not quick enough. Like you've seen Tiger Woods stop his swing, mid-swing. Well, that really hurts, and it's really hard to do. And also your little voice in your head takes over and goes real quick. It goes, well, don't worry, you can still hit this shot. And then you don't, you hit it. It goes all over the place. But yeah, it's kind of weird. But like I just said, on the PGA Tour, a quiet police sign is put in front of your face everywhere you go. It's shut up, you're too loud, stop having fun. These guys are playing, and they're all real serious. On Live Golf, it's like party, man. Let's go. I mean, they're playing while music is going on, and people are. I mean, there is no quiet police on Live Golf. It's let's have fun, and it's the new world order, and Greg and the people that run Live were smart enough to see that. And it's going to pay dividends for them. Now it's going to be interesting because when this, and I keep calling, it's going to be a partnership. It's not going to be a merger. We're going to take the best of all worlds. But there is a scenario where they can't pull together and where they just stay individual entities. And if Liv gets a major television deal, then it's going to be really bad for the PGA Tour. But it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic of how, from the individual event experience, because they are so apart. I mean, just dramatically apart from each other on how that comes together, and they're able to market themselves together.
Do we have any hospitality management people here? Very interesting. Yeah, John.
The player grievances you mentioned, they've been the same for
Ever.
100 years. Do you think they have merit? And has your answer changed now that you're no longer a PGA Tour executive?
That's a really good question. They have some merit, yes. I mean, we tried to be as open and forthright with the players as we possibly could on everything. But when it came to the financial side of golf, we probably weren't as open and forthright as we should have been. But in some cases, you have to explain to them that it's in your best interest to let us do our jobs, and we're the best at this, and we're looking after your best interests. And there's a whole lot of reasons why every dollar that comes through the PGA Tour, we can't put it back out into a purse. But the players were right, and they were proven right when Live Golf came on board, because they knew there was extra money around. And that's, I can't tell you how many policy board meetings I sat in when that came up, and players were belligerent, even on the driving range. I mean, God, you walk in the driving, I had to go to every event, and the way you communicate with the players was on the driving range. I mean, that's where you heard everything and you shared everything. And they always knew there was more money than what met the eye. But when Liv came on board, all of a sudden, the PGA Tour they found this money overnight. They basically found $400 million overnight that they didn't have the day before. And that in itself said, man, something's wrong, And if you're a player, you're telling me to trust you, but yet overnight you found $400 million to prop up all these new events. And part of the problem was, we had the money in reserve for rainy day fund. But when you prop up an event with $400 million for 1 year, the player doesn't go, "Oh, that's great. We did it for a year, but now it's all back to normal. The purse was 25 million, now it's only 8." Their mindset is, if it was 25 million this year, it should be 26 million next year, and then 27 the following year. So this 450 is a perpetual number. And television rights wasn't gonna get it, marketing rights wasn't gonna get it, title sponsors weren't gonna put it up, networks weren't gonna put up any more money. Where was the money going to come from? And that's, to a certain degree, that's what forced the PGA Tour to have to come to the table. They ran out of money. And a lot of people don't know this, but the PGA Tour petitioned the Ninth Circuit Court where the antitrust lawsuit is being contested. They petitioned them to dismiss the suit. And about 4 days before everything hit the fan, the Ninth Circuit ruled against the PGA Tour and said that the antitrust suit would continue. And so the announcement of the merger, with talks already happening behind the scenes secretly for a few weeks before that, they had to finally come out and go, we've got to merge because we can't afford to do this. And it literally would have destroyed the PGA Tour, as we know.
Well, we're almost out of time. I just want to thank Mike for coming back and his wife from the Canadian Rockies to join us here with 110,000 of their closest personal friends tomorrow night. And thank you all for giving of your Friday afternoon. I hope, for me at least, I'm interested in all those things. It delivered on what's going on in golf and what's the business of golf and how do these issues interact and what happens when you invoke morality and for business purposes. So I hope you found it to be worthwhile too, and hope to see you on
October 13th.
on October 3rd, Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
For there are some people, we have to figure out how to spin women's sports initiatives and how patriarchy should be scared or something like that for Shar's talk. Thank you all very much for coming again, and have a great weekend.